All right. Well, hello. This is one of a series of videos that Low Country Presbyterian is doing with the criminal justice system and specifically the prison system. I'm Stephanie Dion, the associate pastor, and on behalf of our outreach ministry, I want to welcome Shirene Hansotia, who serves on the is the senior criminal justice policy counsel at the ACLU and serves as an attorney for the ACLU. So Shirene, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So can you first just tell us your experience with the criminal justice system and the prison system and what your role is specifically at the ACLU?
Sure. I started out as a public defender, actually, and I didn't envision doing that work, but it became my mission. Once I started doing that work, it has grabbed onto me, and I hope that it will sort of light some passion and fire these issues in your congregation as well. Being a public defender is truly one of the most difficult jobs, I think, that's out there. People who are public defenders end up being part social worker, part attorney. And you really are seeing people at the most difficult, most challenging time in their life. It's a stressful time, a difficult time. And so often public defenders get incredible workloads. What you read about public defenders is true. The part that isn't true is that they are the worst attorneys, the least effective attorneys, the people who don't care. The ones that I've met really do care. They have enormous workloads, but they really care about their job. So I did that for about 5 years, but it began to bother me that there weren't a lot of good options for my clients. I felt like we were doing the same things, and I'm sort of a big picture person, and I wanted to look at how can we change the options for people in the state and look at reforming our sentencing laws. So I participated in 2 years, I was awarded a grant from Nelson Mullins Law Firm and to work in public interest law. And so that's when I began doing the work that I continue to this day through ACLU. And now that job and today I work on changing our sentencing laws in the state and improving our prison conditions and trying to improve the criminal justice policy across the state in general.
Wonderful. So with your experience in both of those areas, what do you see as the biggest struggles or aspects that are most broken in the system?
Yeah, a great question. There's a lot of things that are broken in the system. I would say the biggest problem, and it's twofold, is that we are sending too many people to prison, and the people in prison, we are not fulfilling our duty of care. So I think it's a structural problem that requires two fixes. One, we need to narrow that pathway, send far fewer people to prison, divert many of them that can be helped through mental health care or addiction help. Divert many of those people to getting the help that they need rather than incarcerating them. And then for those who are left in prison, because there are some people who need to be in prison, that we need to provide them the tools from day one, not a couple weeks before they're being released. We need to provide programming to prepare them for release and to give them the tools that will allow them to be successful when they do get out. Because 95% of the people that go into prison will get out, and they'll be our neighbors. So it's in all of our best interest to try and give them the tools to be successful when they are released.
Because the recidivism rate is also very high, correct?
Absolutely correct. And a lot of that, in my opinion, is because we have, since the 70s and 80s, huge ramp up in the length of prison sentences and in the number of people that we've sent to prison. So that's had a number of ramifications, including that our state prison budgets have eaten up a ton of resources. And so they've edged out other important priorities: infrastructure, schools, other things, because states have to balance their budget. The federal government doesn't, right? So as prison budgets spiraled, because we sent more people to prison, other options, you know, kind of went by the wayside. We can't pay to send our kids to school in a proper school when we're spending so much of our budget on criminal justice. So yes, recidivism is high. Oh, sorry, I pressed the mute button. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sorry. One of the reasons recidivism is high is because as a result of so many people being sent to prison, we had to cut costs, and corrections departments cut programs at the same time as we had many more people going to prison. So it was the perfect storm in a negative way. We weren't preparing people for release. We were keeping them longer, with no research saying that that's actually effective in deterring crime. And we weren't giving them the skills to succeed on the way out.
Okay. Is part of your work with sentencing, so I know a couple people in the congregation have read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. And so drug laws, for example, having mandatory sentencing. So is that part of your work, is trying to reform some of that?
Yes, absolutely. So her book, first of all, so glad people are reading it, because it is packed with great information, and it is sort of a necessary primer for anyone who's interested in these issues. And I've actually created, on a side note, a list of other books for people who are interested that I'll share with you.
Oh, wonderful. I love that.
But yes, so in addition to working on reforming drug laws, because that is one thing that people have honed in on, in our state, there are actually mandatory minimum sentences for almost every offense. So we actually want to reform mandatory minimum sentencing altogether and eliminate it, because what mandatory minimum sentencing does is to take discretion away from a judge. And it really should be up to a judge to discern on an individual basis. So a lawyer can advocate if there's mitigating factors that make a person, you know, more like that they should be given a lighter sentence, great. Or if there are some factors that make this person more dangerous or potentially more dangerous, then the prosecutor can argue for that. But mandatory minimum sentences tie the hands of judges, and they automatically mean a lengthy sentence that has to be served. And so we're against all mandatory minimum sentencing.
Okay, so that's the ACLU's position, is against all mandatory sentencing.
Yeah, and it's also, you know, our policies are all based on research, and the vast majority of research, there's been quite a bunch of research done on the efficacy or lack of efficacy of long sentencing. And, you know, there's a whole history of how this came about, both mandatory minimums and a lot of other types of sentences, from the drug laws and from basically abolishing parole in a lot of states. And it's very well accepted today in this field that long sentences do not equal deterrence. In fact, in many ways, they can actually create a higher recidivism rate, because you're taking a person out of the community, you're decreasing their job skills, breaking up relationships, losing homes, losing resources. And so that creates someone who comes out who isn't able to succeed. And so we're re-looking at this idea of whether it really makes sense to put people away for a long period of time for every sentence. There are times when that needs to be done, but in general, we think this across the board approach is, the research doesn't suggest it works, nor is it for me.
And people and their circumstances are particular.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody's an individual, and we should be treated as such. And I think originally the argument for mandatory minimum sentencing was actually that it would take away biases, so that you know, certain groups of people weren't punished more harshly than others. But what it really has done is put the hammer down on everyone in the most ineffective policy choice we could make.
Thank you. We as a church, so, you know, the Bible talks a lot about justice and in different ways justice. So especially in your work with the prison system, you know, there's retributive justice and restorative justice. What what is our prison system like, particularly for the state of South Carolina? Is it one or the other? Is it both?
Great question. It is 99.9% retribution, unfortunately. And that is one thing that I would love to work with anyone who's interested on changing. Because what we need to do is have a lot more restorative justice. There are some thinkers in our state. There's a USC professor who is creating a restorative justice center at University of South Carolina. She's very passionate about it. But that is the key to the future. So I would say the past and present are largely retribution. And we have been focused on, as a country, I think, and as a state of South Carolina, on retribution goals. That is how I view it. Not so much restorative justice or giving people chances, but that is the wave of the future. And that is the way to actually get our recidivism rates down. And actually, a lot of research shows that victims get a far higher rate of satisfaction by being able to participate in restorative justice programs. Now, there's all kinds of victims. Everybody differs, but a lot of people want to be able to ask a person, why did you do so? Why did you do this? What happened to my loved one during this period? It's not to say the person doesn't get punished, but we can work with different punishments and give victims a voice in the process as well.
Thank you. So on that same kind of line, so it sounds like there's hope for restorative justice coming and those kind of reforms. What are some things that are going well for the criminal justice and prison systems and that can be built on?
Sure. Let me go back for 1 second and just harp on one thing that I think is really crucial in our prisons that's a problem that maybe you all can help with. And I promise I'm going to answer the other question too.
Okay.
Medical and mental health issues. We have a huge staffing problem. That's an issue in every state in the country. And I'm mostly talking about state prisons here. I do also care about the federal institutions in our state, and incarcerated people everywhere share common issues. But by and large, the vast majority of people who are in prison and incarcerated in the country are in state prisons. And our state prisons in particular, and southern states in particular, are struggling with staffing problems. But aside from that, staffing problems create problems with getting people to important medical appointments, to getting them the mental health care they need, to getting to programs, getting rec time, visiting with loved ones, which research shows reduces recidivism. All of these things are impacted by a lack of staff, and we have a chronic staffing problem. So two things that will lead to a positive change. One, volunteers are such an integral part of our prison programs in this state. We have a small number of very dedicated people, and they come mostly from the religious community, which I am so grateful for, that go into the prisons and teach programs. And it is a vital thing. It is so important, not just for the content of the programs, which is important, but also for the ties that are made with people inside, because we're all worse than the worst thing we've done. That's a Brian Stevenson quote that probably a lot of people have heard. We all are better than the worst thing that we've done. And that's true of prisons. And I hope that everybody's open to the idea of walking into a prison someday and seeing that they're just people like you and I who have made a bad choice along the way. And positive things, I'm sorry. Programs with volunteers. Some of them, particularly in Allendale, have been very successful and very promising. And I'd love to continue that in other prisons in the state. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I was just going to add that, just because you're even coming from a church community and volunteering in a prison doesn't mean that you have to go and lead a Bible study to make a difference. You can use whatever your passion is.
Absolutely.
And that be a benefit to others.
Absolutely. It is about more than the content. But I do have friends who go in. I have a friend who is a 92-year-old father who up until COVID was regularly going in and teaching chess to young men. We have people that go in and teach about guitar lessons, gardening, horticulture, how to do water gardens, growing vegetables inside the prisons, all different kinds, beekeeping, prison pet programs. The sky's the limit, but every program is important, partly because of the interaction and socialization skills and just having someone, seeing that someone cares.
And isn't afraid of you.
Right, exactly. That sees you as a person, right?
Wonderful. So, well, you've already mentioned some things that we as a church can do and advocate for, and hopefully we'll continue some of those conversations with other videos and maybe even future conversations with you. But is there anything else that you would like to add that you think would be beneficial for us to know or for us to do as a faith community?
Sure. In addition to, anyone who's interested in potentially volunteering or even walking into a prison, seeing what it's like to see if they're willing to volunteer, because there's no pressure. There's a lot of great programs in the state that maybe people would be interested in volunteering with. One that's really stands out to me that I've worked with before is called Turning Leaf. And they are based in, now I know that's a little bit of a drive for folks. So they're based in North Charleston. However, she's working on opening up a chapter in Columbia, and then next will be Greenville. Not that any of those are closer, but I just mentioned that. Turning Leaf is a groundbreaking program that works with people that have just left prison. And so it's a reentry program, and it's been very effective. She takes only the hardest to how do I describe this? They're described as the hardest to reform because they've had a long history of recidivating. So she actually looks for people who have come back to prison over and over and over again, and only culls out the most difficult of those cases and works with those individuals and uses cognitive behavioral therapy to change their thinking and their notion of their choices. And it's been very successful. And it's a wonderful program if people are interested in learning more about that. It might be a great volunteer opportunity.
Yeah, and for the congregation's sake, those who did the Walk for Water this last year, which is another organization based in North Charleston.
Oh, right, I know that. Yes.
Turning Leaf made the T-shirts for the Walk for Water the Walk for Water anyway this year. So some of you have their T-shirts already that formerly incarcerated people have made. So there's a little connection to that organization.
Yeah, what a great the group you mentioned as well that they do the wells overseas, is that right?
Yes.
Oh, what a great group. Okay, that was wonderful.
Yeah,
good.
Well, Shirene, thank you so much for your time and for educating us and giving us some tangible things that we could potentially do. I hope that you all who have tuned in to watch this will keep an eye out for an opportunity for a discussion with myself and Chaplain Bo Welch, so that we as a church can think about what does our faith call us to do with this information that we've just been given. So keep an eye out for that, and thank you for watching, and thank you again, Shirene.
Can I just send a special thank you to Bo Welch because for the work he does, it's so important. And also thank you all for being interested in this topic. And I'm happy to talk with anyone further if they're interested. Thank you
so much.